It is an honor to be with you. I'm so thrilled that we have a room packed with folks that want to attack the issue. Because so often in our culture, we've said, we'll just put this off. It's okay. This can't happen in our home. It'll be all right. And we've left our kids vulnerable. So today we're going to talk about raising courageous kids. Is this mic on? Should I turn it off? Put it down? Okay, good. We're going to talk about raising courageous kids to confront their culture. It's not enough to put up barriers and say, no, this isn't what you do. And you want to encourage them and train them so that they understand the impact pornography is having on our culture, the impact pornography can have on their lives, on their future relationships, so that they own this for themselves. Let me tell you a story about a dad I met after a session like this. And he said, Sam, I wish I'd met you just 1 year earlier. That was before the FBI knocked on my door. You see, his grandparents had purchased a computer for him. This was back, before there were too many handheld devices in kids' hands. And they didn't have the internet in their home, so they thought, hey, this is going to be totally safe. Everything's going to be fine. He'll be able to use this for schoolwork, etc. But he found internet everywhere else. In fact, he tapped into the neighbor's internet, and he began a deep plunge into pornography at 14 years old. After his arrest, or after the FBI came there, he said, Dad, it started off pretty innocent. I was going to Sports Illustrated and I found the swimsuit edition, and then I began Googling words, and next thing I was in forums and chat rooms, and I was asking a 13-year-old girl to meet me for sex, when in fact I was talking to an FBI agent. But it doesn't have to be that way. Now, I think there's probably many of you in here going, that could never happen to my child. No way. It couldn't happen to my kid. We've got things in place better. But I want to tell you that this kid was a great athlete. He made fabulous grades in school. He went to services every Sunday morning. He was a kid that every mom and dad would be proud of. He's probably a lot like your kid. But he got sucked in, and he was not prepared for the pornified world that drew him in. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. How does that happen? How do young people get sucked into this so easy? Before I do, let me tell you another story about a 13-year-old boy who sits in his dad's car, and he says, Dad, guys are dumb. And Dad says, okay, I know a good story when I hear one. Why are guys dumb? He says they're standing around after practice today talking about their favorite pornography to watch, what sites they like to go to, and what acts they like to see. And they look at me, Dad, because I wasn't saying anything. They says, come on, Ben, what kind of porn do you watch? And he goes, I don't watch porn. And they're like, give me a break. Everybody watches porn. And he says, well, for the first reason I don't watch porn is because of my faith. And they were like, well, we have that too. Or others were like, whatever, that's your deal. And the guy says, guys, do you know how addictive this can be? And they're like, no way, we could stop anytime we wanted to. And he says, if that's true, why are so many men and women seeking therapy today for pornography addiction and sex addiction? Why are guys like Tiger Woods, who are married to a supermodel, yet that is not enough? They don't have a comeback for that. So he says to them, what does it say about you if you guys get excited by watching a slave? And they're like, what? Now, he didn't say get excited. I cleaned it up for you. But you get the idea. What does it say about you if you get excited by watching a slave? And they're like, what are you talking about? He says, pornography is contributing to sex trafficking, and sex trafficking is contributing to pornography. When you do a Google search for porn, you're going to be looking at a slave. What does that say about you? Now you got to imagine this 13-year-old. He's surrounded by his peers. He's surrounded by young men who at 13 years old, who have all been sucked in by pornography. He is a lone voice, yet he is knowledgeable enough, trained well enough, courageous enough to stand up to his peers and says, no, pornography is wrong. Who do we want our kids to be? Do we want them to be the 13-year-olds who are comparing notes on the soccer field? Of course not. Do we want them to be the one that's asking a 13-year-old to meet for sex? Of course not. Do we want the young woman who's alone, trapped within her own pornography, seeking more and more attention through pornography, through her own, that she is facing that struggle all by herself? Do we want that? Of course not. Heaven forbid. We want courageous kids who can stand in a culture that is awash in porn and confront it and say, no, this is wrong. It matters to me. It matters to my God. It matters to a world that is enslaved. It's going to matter to my future spouse, to my future kids. That's the kind of kids we want to raise. So we're going to talk a little bit about, this will kind of give you a flow of where we're at in this discussion. We're going to talk about lost innocence. We're going to talk about creating an environment where we can have conversations that are discipling and teaching and instructive. We're going to get down to chatting. Oops. And I'm going to give you some resources so you're not trying to face this all alone. If there's anything that I've learned in all of this, it is you are there as a mom and dad, as a grandparent, are the kid's best resource. The best resource. Today our kids are being exposed early. Now I'm supposed to have all this figured out, right? Nothing can happen in my house, but I want you to know this is real life. I've walked this road. First of all, I want you to know that I stand here before you porn-free. That wasn't true always. I came from a violent home and found pornography, and I had a friend whose dad had a library of pornography, and I had all that I wanted. And so I would flee to pornography when I was anxious or fearful or tired or whatever it was, whatever's happening at that point. I didn't realize that was my escape, that became my salve. It just became engrossing. It followed me through my teenage years. It followed me into college, and it followed me where it was seemingly totally accepted. But then it followed me into marriage. And I had a pornography magazine laying out on my workbench because I didn't think anything of it. And my wife came down. We've just been married. And she said, we can't do this in our home. I have to be the one you're seeking. And when I look at these pictures, this doesn't look like art. This doesn't look like, it looks like you want to have sex with these women. Yeah, that's what porn's all about. So then I found my faith, and the two didn't coordinate. So I told my wife, I'll let this go. You're the one I love. But then my brain went on fire. And I couldn't escape. And when I got into my faith, I discovered then that pornography was addictive, and then began following the processes of accountability to find my own escape. But kids are being exposed today. If I was exposed young, today, the younger you are, the more likely you are being exposed at earlier and early ages. 90% of our boys and 63% of our girls are being exposed to pornography, and it's having an impact on them. Our kids are hiding what they're doing online, and mom and dad are pretty often, they're just like holding back. And however you're serving in your local community, I want you to help me spread the word about this. I need you to help me spread the word about this, about the impact. And so if you'll see my email address up here, and if you decide that, hey, I think I'd like to do that presentation in my community, you can do that. Send me an email, sam.black@covenanteyes.com, and I will send you this PowerPoint, and you can present it yourself. So here are the 4 myths that parents believe. My child is a good kid, just would never look at pornography. They'll never be curious. We were never curious as kids, right? If my child saw it, well, they'd just look away. It wouldn't have any hold on them. It wouldn't be attractive to them. They'd find that's gross and they'd look away. They wouldn't. That's myth number 2. Myth number 3 is the measures I have in place are good enough. Likely that might be that we have the computer in an open spot, or maybe we've done some filtering or something like that. And number 4, boys are the only ones who struggle. I want you to know today that we see, most studies are showing about 1/3 or more of young girls are struggling with internet pornography. This is a serious issue for our girls too. Yet there is a great disparity in what parents believe and what is reality. So I do this little poll. Raise your hand if you know what incognito or private browsing is. Go ahead and raise your hand, incognito or private browsing. You guys are really smart. Do that again. I'm just doing a little, keep your hand up. So we're looking at probably here good 50%, maybe 60% or so, maybe better. Usually when I show this, when I ask that question, I get about 18 to 30% of parents know what incognito mode or private browsing is. And simply, it's one of the easiest ways that kids are hiding what they're doing online. I just don't want my history recorded at this time. So mom and dad are looking through a browser history thinking, I think I have an idea what's going on, and it's being hidden. That's one of the easiest ways to do. I always forget to say this, so I'll just spit it out. Covenant Eyes, by the way, covers anything in private browsing or incognito mode as well, so I just won't forget that. Teens spend an average of 5 hours a day online, but parents usually think it's about 2. Our kids, again, are being exposed earlier and earlier. And I said this hits home. I'm supposed to have everything figured out. My 8-year-old son was exposed to pornography. He's not 8 now. When he was 8 years old, he was exposed to pornography by another 8-year-old boy who had just got an iPod Touch for Christmas. He's only had it a month. And in 1 month, now this family didn't have the internet in their home either. They didn't have Wi-Fi in their home. But he found Wi-Fi at McDonald's and everywhere else. And with 1 month, he went from, I don't know really much about sex, to hardcore porn. That's where our kids are going today. They're not going from this introductory pin-up things, etc. They're going from, I don't know anything, to hardcore pornography. And they're not prepared for it. We're graduating our first generations who don't know a world without the internet. And since 2007, we've been handing these smart devices to our kids, and they're going everywhere. Our culture is telling them, listen, this is healthy. This is a healthy way to express your sexuality. This is a healthy way to learn more about yourself and understand what is pleasing. And often they see that what they do online is private. What they do online is their private business and no one should know, including mom and dad. And often they've learned that from us because we've led that what we do online is private. So, kids see porn. What's the big deal? God designed our amazing brains. And he created sex to be this beautiful thing. But it has been hijacked, and it has hijacked the process. So we should not, too often parents will think, well, if we don't make too big of a deal of it, it just won't have any impact. But that's not true, because all the necessary mechanisms are there. And we're going to talk a little bit about how does viewing pornography begin lighting up the brain. First thing is children have more mirror neurons than adults. You know how kids learn so much faster than we do? Well, mirror neurons make it feel like you're actually doing what you see. And so that helps you to learn faster. And that's one of the ways that kids are, when they're exposed to pornography, is even more impactful. Now, I'm going to imagine that you have seen a lot of brain science today, and I'll try to keep this brief. And I'm going to follow some notes here because I get a tendency to run on, and so I'm going to keep myself right on track with a few notes. But dopamine focuses your attention. So when sexual cues are picked up, and it loves novelty. So a child being exposed to pornography, they see something first that is very curious, that they don't understand. It's novel, it's very interesting, and it can have a deep impact. And that dopamine begins focusing their attention. With repetitive use, and as they begin to understand what is going on, or maybe they're acting out with it with masturbation, it motivates them forward. It activates, enhances that reward circuitry. It fuels later that tension for a craving or a need. So with repetitive use, it begins fueling it, and now a craving and a need. Dopamine also helps you remember how to respond to a past activity. And it says, hey, do this now when cues are picked up again. Testosterone is another, of course, chemical is released by both men and women, but especially in men, it is slow to dissipate. Now, when sexual cues are picked up, the testes release lots more testosterone. And that creates a heightened sense, a heightened awareness of sexual desire. It's also slow to dissipate. So men are actually creating their own chemical imbalance where they go around in a heightened state of sexual awareness. And they're walking through the grocery store, or a teenager is undressing everyone that he's seeing, regardless of whether she is dressed provocatively or not. Norepinephrine helps with sexual memory. It helps you remember. It burns emotional experiences in our minds, whether it's a wonderful sexual experience with our spouse or a provocative sexual image. The information is stored for easy recall with norepinephrine. Oxytocin is released as a bonding hormone, especially with skin-to-skin contact. Do you remember when you held your child for the first time? Remember that? Raise your hand if you remember scooping up your baby for the first time. And that, oh man, I tell you what, I liked kids. They were okay. They were good. I like children. But when my daughter was born, before babies were like this, you had to be really delicate and careful with them, that kind of thing. But when my daughter was born, I scooped her up like a football. I was like, honey, I don't think I know what this kind. I don't know what this kind of love is. This is totally different. This is something spectacular. And that bonding, that oxytocin is that kind of bonding hormone. It's often released then. But it's also released at climax. And so people are being bonded to the situation where they're acting out with pornography. So they begin that memory. This is what it happens. I get this dose of oxytocin. It has a negative impact for the porn user. Instead of bonding to a real mate, the porn viewer's brain bonds to the image or the video or the situation. And it's especially so as it's done through repetitive use. And then serotonin is that released after climax, that calm feeling, the well-being, the satisfaction. But our brains, our kids' brains, don't operate in simply this chemical bathtub. There's a physical brain going on where we're actually burning or creating neural pathways to make pornography use more attractive, more interesting, and easier. It's this lifelong ability to wire and rewire the brain. It's called neuroplasticity. Now listen, some of this is going to be like, wow, this is a little more in depth. And a lot of this is going to be, hey, I think I knew that. And the truth is, some of this is brain science, And a lot of this is common sense. And so as soon as we get through some of the brain science, we're going to talk about some things that are real common sense, things you can do every day to address these issues that we're seeing in brain science. So first, I need you to understand there's use it or lose it. The more something is done, the easier it becomes. And that happens with pornography. The more it's used, it actually begins creating neural pathways. Picture a walk in the woods. And the first time you've walked through there, you've got to clear out the briars and everything else. But after it's done for a while, it becomes very easy. You actually know. You want to go back. You want to go look for that pathway. Neurons that wire together, and neurons that wire apart, fire apart. What that means is if you've ever done something for the first time and it was hard and you did it several times, it began become easier. Well, the same thing is happening with pornography. You're actually creating neural pathways that create a craving and a need and a desire to go down that pathway again and again. And repetition ingrains that neural pathway. They get stuck in a rut. Sensitization. And I'm going to run through these pretty quick. Sensitization simply means that cues are picked up very quickly. The person who acts out with pornography for the first time begins a learning process of how to respond to porn in the future. And after a person becomes sensitized, very little is needed to trigger that response. If they see a sexualized media, they find it hard to look away. They see something attractive, they can't help. They just feel like they have to act out. If they see pornography, the idea that it will stick in their head, that neural pathway is burned in, and trying to turn that off is too hard. They'll have triggers, and triggers may be something as simple as being home alone, being away from others, having your device in the bathroom. Whatever it is, it could be a number of things that says, this is my time to act out. Desensitization is simply about what used to be exciting isn't quite doing it enough. They need a bigger dose. They need something a little more provocative, a little more out there. And so if we find teenagers who are using pornography on an extended basis, suddenly they're going to places they never expected to be. Doing things that they would never have thought, they would have thought that was gross or disgusting or mean or cruel, but now suddenly it's becoming arousing. Their brains have become desensitized to what they're viewing. And finally, at the bottom of that desensitization list is hyperfrontality, and it really should be its own thing. Hyperfrontality is simply, they have lacked the control. They're compulsive. Compulsivity is a very good descriptor for hyperfrontality. The prefrontal cortex, the decision-making part of the brain, has been so used to giving in to acting out with pornography that no longer can they say no. They have to act out. They don't have the control that says, no, I got to stop. So how do we begin confronting this? Let me go back. We were talking to a mom. She had attended a session like this, and she said, she emailed us like a week or two later. And she said, I was really going to have these discussions with my child. I was really going to begin putting the software and tools in place to begin protecting my family and my home. I had good intentions, but I put it off. Procrastination it's the enemy of good intentions. And she said, my daughter walked in on my 11-year-old son, and he's been binging on porn for 2 weeks. And he said, Mom, I knew it was wrong. I couldn't stop clicking. And I don't know why. I just couldn't stop clicking. All the things we just talked to about the neuroscience, that's why he couldn't stop clicking. It makes perfect neurological sense. Today, it's not if our kids are going to be exposed, but when, and are they going to be prepared to deal with it? Because our culture is teaching that what happens online is private, because many parents believe myths about how porn impacts their kids. We've often avoided the conversations about it. So what we have to do as moms and dads is to create safe environments where everything is on the table and we can talk about anything, that nothing is off limits. And we can begin talking about these issues of pornography. So how do we do that? We start early, for one. I often run into moms and dads who say, I don't think I need to talk about this yet. My child is only 12 or 13. And they're missing it. They're still stuck in the myths, right? We need to begin having these conversations very early. I was just talking to a family, and the 6-year-old had been exposed to pornography by another kindergartner. That's the kind of culture we're living in today. So we need to, begin having those conversations early about our private areas, what is our bathing suit areas, and why that's private, and why that's intended to be private. There's some great books out there that's available. One is called The Talk by Luke Gilkerson. Great book for that. Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. Great book to begin having the conversations about what we're seeing online, but especially The Talk starts them earlier about how, and scripts out the conversations to have with your child about how God designed our bodies and why that is important and why sex is reserved in marriage. We need to have age-appropriate conversations, of course. Kids don't want to be aren't ready for teen conversations, and teens don't want to be talked to like kids. So we need to address that accordingly. And I want to encourage you to pull out a calendar as soon as you get home, or open up your cell phone and begin marking dates on the calendar of when you're going to be talking to your kids. And you need to do it at least every other month. Now you'll think, now that's crazy. Why would I begin marking it down on the calendar? Because if you don't, you'll find many months or even a year or so has passed and you haven't had these conversations. Now, these are the serious conversations that you're going to set up and you're going to do some study for and you're going to think about, you're going to do some research on, and you're going to say, hey, I want to make sure that I have good conversation on this topic. And you're going to set aside the time and you're going to make it fun, but you're going to have a conversation with your kids on that. Whatever that topic is. Now, we have some great ebooks out on our table, etc. You just put your name and email address. We send you a link. You download what you need. But it's going to help you have those conversations with your kids. Use Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, etc. Use Educate, Empower Kids. They've got some great resources out there in the lobby. Use their books and begin having use those tools so you're actually guiding the conversations you're having with your kids. Now, that's the specific topics. But life throws a lot at us. So number 4 on there, have these small or mini conversations as life provides opportunities. When we're driving down the freeway, or when we're watching TV, or a YouTube video shows up unannounced that we didn't expect, we can turn that into a conversation. And so as life provides these conversations, you can have these little spritz conversations. They can go long or they can go really short. Mostly they probably should go short, but if they go longer, that's okay too. Regardless of what you're doing in these conversations, please don't lecture. Do you recall the lectures you got from your mom and dad? Do you? And your eyes were rolling back in your head, and it was this long drawn-out conversation. A conversation has 2 participants. That means you should be asking a good amount of questions along the way, too. And these questions allow them to speak to you. And you get down, and they'll teach you things about what's going on in their school or what's going on with other kids in their, etc. They'll teach you a lot where you can begin speaking in their lives what they're curious about, what their interests are. And you have to make it safe. That means when my son came to me one day and he said, Dad, what's this expletive? I just kind of kept driving and I looked over at him and I said, well, where'd you hear about that? And he told me, and I says, oh, okay. And, well, this is what it is. And it was a very crude sexual term. And then I gave him perspective on that, godly perspective on that as well. I had to make it safe, because if I don't make it safe, if I say, hey, we don't talk like that in our house, why would you ever say anything like that? He will not come to me the next time. And so we have to train, and we have to make it safe that you can come to me, because if you go ask Google, you're going to see things that you shouldn't see. If you go ask your friends, they're going to tell you things that aren't quite right. In fact, they're mostly not right. And so I want you to always come to me, son, and anytime, it doesn't matter what it is, nothing is off limits. It's always safe to come into mom and dad. Doesn't matter what it is. Now, your kids need to know that you're not going to freak out. And so let me give you what I call the freak out dad game. And so remember, my son was exposed to pornography at 8 years old. He's gone from a basic understanding of what sexuality is about to seeing hardcore pornography. So we've got to begin a whole different style of training. And so I'd say, son, you go in the other room and you make up a story and you try to freak me out, and you come back in, tell me a story, and we'll roll with it. So he'd go in the other room and he'd come out and he said, Dad. And I said, yes. He says, we and some of the boys were down at the gas station and we were getting some Slurpees, and this one guy had a magazine in it, had pictures of naked ladies in it. And I say, okay, now what'd you see? How'd that make you feel? This is real life. And I said, son, we do this because pornography is designed to give you secrets, and secrets will make you sick. But if we remove the secrecy, if we can talk it out, if we can discuss it, or if we can unveil it, then it doesn't have an opportunity to stain your heart and stain your mind and stain your soul. You can be free from it. It doesn't have to have a hold on your life. Now, I really want to encourage you to take good care of these conversations, but we got to lighten up. So, for my son, he loves root beer, and A&W is okay or whatever, but he likes the really, the craft-made root beers. So we'll get those ones that are like $2 a bottle, and we're sitting down. We'll have compare notes on how good this root beer is, and we'll talk about serious issues, whether that's pornography or other things. And it's really an opportunity to just lighten the atmosphere, make it easy to have the conversation. We're doing something fun. So if you want to share an ice cream cone or do whatever they like to do, make it so it's comfortable for them. It can be comfortable for you too. Allow them to crack some jokes. I don't know if you guys have Hardee's around here. Do you guys have Hardee's around here? No, you don't know what this is. So there's this. Oh, good. They used to have, just last year, they were having these horrific commercials, and they had women on top of cars eating hamburgers, pretty much half naked. And it was like, you're selling hamburgers. Why this? That's ludicrous, isn't it? You tell me you can't make a joke about that? So allow them to have jokes about our culture is so ridiculous. Why would we ever allow that kind of thing on our billboard? Why would we allow that kind of thing on these big posters in our malls? Let them laugh. It's okay to laugh. Let him do it too. We have to remember it's serious stuff, but we can have these conversations that lighten the mood, and they keep coming back to you. We want to get real, and sometimes you want to say the right thing. But sometimes how you say it is what matters most. So tone can be everything. Make it open, feel calm, act calm, even when you're not calm, pretend you're calm, and make these conversations easy. And don't do all the talking. Let silence sometimes hang. Leave them, ask a question, but don't try to fill the silence. Leave it out there for a bit and see what they come up with. Give them time to think through it. You might have to prompt them again. That's okay. But don't do all the talking. You listen, really listen. And how do we listen? We listen when we have our attention focused. We show attention with our body language. And we show attention with what we're hearing. And it's good to repeat back. So I think I hear what you're saying is this, son. Or is this what you're asking about? I remember one time thinking, oh, he's asking something about I don't really want to have a conversation about now. And I says, okay, can you tell me a little more about that? And he goes, oh, it's something another. It was really, he was asking about condominiums. What's a condominium, Dad? Oh, it's a place where you go on vacation, you get, etc. Do some discovery. If you walk in these conversations, and you haven't done a little bit of the training, you haven't done the books from Educate and Empower Kids, you haven't taken time to download some of the ebooks from Covenant Eyes, or you're going to be a little bit limited. So you need to take some time, and it's so grateful for you guys being here because you're getting a download of information here. And again, those age-appropriate conversations. At Covenant Eyes, and I'm going to show you this email address or website in a bit. Many of you may not know what Covenant Eyes is. What we do is, I'll come back to that later, never mind. These are resources that are free on our website at covenanteyes.com/ebooks. When your child is looking at porn, we actually walk you through how to do the discussions. If your child has been exposed to pornography, we help you walk through a discovery process. How deeply are they involved with pornography? Was it just curiosity? Were they exposed by a friend they've been viewing sometime? Is this now a compulsive activity? And then based on that, we actually provide you scripts, so it helps guide you along in this conversation. We've done a lot of the work for you. Accountable kids. How do we introduce the concept of accountability to our children? So take advantage of those. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just wrap our kids in some bubble wrap and they'd just be safe? You could just, those big balls, those big blow-up balls, and you roll around in them? Wouldn't that be nice if we could just protect our kids that way? And so often what families have done is they've tried to put filtering only on their devices to try to lock it down. But it doesn't work. Barna Research did a study last year, and they found that 100% of the homes, yes, all of them, that were using filtering only, someone in the home was actually accessing pornography. They treat it like that wooden fence, and they walk around that fence until they find a loose board or an open gate, and they beat on those boards and loose gates to find a way in, and that becomes their secret way to access inappropriate content. So we need to be monitoring how, whatever software you're using, it needs to be able to monitor. Blocking is great, filtering is great, but it needs to show when they're stepping into those gray areas as well, so that you can see when maybe they're testing their limits to see where they're going. They're not beating up a filter in privacy. So we need to train our kids. Is there another way that we can do this well? We do not live in a set it and forget it world. And so we need to train our kids to fight these temptations. We need to disciple them with these conversations we're having. And we need to be accountable. Now, I'm going to give you just a brief, because I need to just kind of give you an overview of what this does. What Covenant Eyes does is we actually rate the pages on the internet, just like you'd see for video games and television shows, T for teen, M for mature, HM for highly mature. And then that goes into a report. And so the idea is to make it easy. You get a report, and you can see the ratings you care about that are of concern. And you use these reports to have this ongoing conversation. It's just a tool. It's not the answer. It's not, hey, I said it, I forget it, it's all good. It only equips mom and dad to continue having the conversation on an ongoing basis. Let's create these conversations that become inspirational to them, that We build champions in our kids. If there are issues that are going on, let's encourage change to build champions. And we begin building champions at a young age and through consistency. And if I can tell you one thing that's important is that you are your kids' most valuable asset. If that's the only thing you get out of this, but you have to be engaged and you have to have this ongoing discussion. So Barna Research did this poll and they found that 47% of 13 to 17-year-olds said that porn is neither good nor bad. It just is what it is. And another 11% says, no, porn is good for society. We should have more porn. And then they asked, well, we'd like to compare that with people who are being held accountable. And so they asked if they could interview our customers at random. And they found that 13 to 24-year-olds, 85% said no, pornography is very bad for society. 9% said it is somewhat bad for society. 4% said it's neither good nor bad. 4% says 2% said, I'm really mad that mom and dad put the software on my devices. We can change when we talk about it, when we unveil the secrecy, when we make it out in the open, we actually have real conversations, we begin changing our attitudes of our children toward what it is. So we want to develop an atmosphere of honesty. We want to make accountability the standard of our home. I want you to know my kids have grown up watching me hand my phone over to 3 other guys that they know in our family, that are trusted. They know that they are my accountability partners. I'm not asking them to do something I'm not willing to do myself. And too often when we have created a culture that says, this is mom and dad and we live over here, but you guys have to do this. And that's not creating a culture of accountability in the home. You lead by example. I also want to encourage you to own up to your failures. That, son, I have accountability partners because I'm not above temptation. And I never want to go in that dark hole again. Maybe you don't want to talk about the dark hole you were in. I waited till my kids were a little older and then they understood more about these things. But when they were younger, it was like, this is the standard of our home, son. I'm not asking you to do something I'm not willing to do myself. That spoke volumes to him. For his mom to get a report about how I use the internet said to him, son, this is how you should treat your wife in the future. To my daughter, it told her the same thing. This is how you should be respected as a woman. Now, I also want to tell you to be prepared. Be prepared even when you're not. And how do you be prepared when you're not? Sometimes you really have to do some thinking, but sometimes they're going to ask you questions you just don't know the answer to, and you just say, hey, we're going to meet back together, and we'll have this ongoing conversation. We'll continue this conversation. I don't know the answer to this, but I'm going to find out. Now, I'll tell you one time, like I said, everything's perfect in my house. No one ever gets in trouble. My daughter was, I believe she was 14 years old. And I got her report, and she had just viewed on her put on her Facebook page. I hope I'm not going to be offensive. I'm not meaning being offensive, but this is real life. She has posted on her Facebook page, why do guys get laid and girls get screwed? Are you kidding me? Everybody in our community is our friend, and all of our friends are your friends too, and you're posting this on your Facebook. That's what when I got a report, I'm sitting in my office thinking, oh my goodness, why would you do that? And I really felt God speaking to me and saying, Sam, this is your opportunity to be a dad. Step up. So my wife and I sat down with her that night, and I said, honey, I got your report, and I saw this, and I saw this on Facebook. Tell me, why is that true? Now, that was the last question she expected me, but I had some time to think about it and go through it. And so I asked her, honey, why is that true? And she said, Dad, gave me a total thing that I wouldn't have expected. Dad, I overheard some boys talking about another girl that I know, and it made me so angry the way they were talking about her. Dad, there's a double standard in our culture where women are treated this way and they're treated as objects. And I don't think it's right. It's wrong. They shouldn't be treated this way. They shouldn't be looked at this way. I said, honey, you are absolutely right. We began going through some biblical perspective on how a woman should be treated, how she should be regarded, how she should be honored. Now, at this point, she's really excited. She's nearly on a pedestal, just like giving it to me and my wife, saying, yes, this is how women should be treated. And I says, oh, by the way, I was looking also some of the videos you were watching on YouTube of pop culture music that you've been listening to. And I printed out the lyrics. And if you don't mind, would you read these to me? Suddenly, things got very silent. I said, that's okay. I'll read them to you. I said, hon, this doesn't say the things you say you believe in. This is how women should be treated? This is what they're like? See, I'm now on her level. It's not Dad is saying, pop music is wrong, child, and you shouldn't be looking at that or listening to those videos or etc., because that's naughty. Right? Flies over her head, and she's not engaged. Accountability has given me conversations with my kids that I would have totally missed again and again and again. Because it shows me what they're curious about. It showed me what their interests are. And so I said, honey, every time you click on that one of those links for that pop culture music that degrades women, you are voting and you are telling those producers, make more of this. This is how women should be treated. This is how I agree women should be viewed. Suddenly she says, I get it, Dad. I get it. Now, she's 20 years old today. Or not today. She's 20 years old now. And she's going with me to events, working a booth. We have 170 people working at Covenant Eyes, and she can't wait to go with Dad to tell other parents, I was raised with accountability. This is what accountability meant to me. And at 14, when her friends would come over and spend the night, and they say, so your dad gets a report of how you use the internet? Doesn't that freak you out? And she'd go like, no, why would it? It becomes part of the culture of your home. Let's remember three things. Lost innocence today is unavoidable. And you'll have to create an atmosphere where you can talk about anything, where nothing is off limits, where you don't lecture, where things are safe, where you can have those conversations. And I want to encourage you to start having those conversations today. I told you that you could request this PowerPoint for me, and you can get it here at sam.black@covenanteyes.com. Send me an email. Say, hey, Sam, I heard your presentation at UCAP. I'd like to present this in my local community. Be happy to send it to you. We offer 18 separate educational resources, and they're all free. The Impact of Pornography on the Brain. Coming Clean is an ebook about how do I have an accountability relationship? I don't really know how to do this well. How do I bring another guy into my life or another woman into my life that I can be open with and share anything with? So please use those resources. Now, I think we have 5 minutes for questions. So if you have a question, raise your hand and I'll do my best to answer. Yes, please. Yeah, okay, good. Thank you. I want to make sure I'm clear on that. She said, I didn't quite get it about the freak out game. So the freak out game is simply designed so that your child knows that you won't freak out when you come to them with something really that they think could be bad. So the idea is we're role-playing it, and by role-playing this freak-out dad game, they know it's safe. You don't freak out when they come to you. Does that answer your question? Any other questions? Yes?
What about talking to children when you're not the parent, but you're a sister or an aunt or someone else in the family-centered home?
You're within the family unit. The question is, what if you're not the parent, but you're a part of the family unit? Can you talk about this? That really depends on your relationship with the parent. And I really encourage you to talk to mom and dad first. Because one, you're going to need to get mom and dad on board. And if there's this big blow up from it, it probably won't be nearly as productive. And you want to help enable not only a conversation you can have, but you want to encourage mom and dad that this is important. And maybe that you can be a good influence as well. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, sir. What if parents have different views on pornography? It's tough. It's very tough because, and especially in broken homes, where divorced homes where we have kids going back and forth. One parent thinks, hey, that's not a big deal. They'll get over it. It's not so. And at our house, we have these things. There's a lot of material here. I would really encourage you to train and teach the other parent so that they really can get a better understanding that the impact it can have. Because we all want our children to grow up and have successful relationships. We want to have grandchildren someday that are in a stable home, right? Yes, sir.
How would you go about initiating conversation with parents in the neighborhood? Like my son goes over and they're playing in the basement one day. Every house they go to. How do you have a conversation with other parents without them feeling like you're accusing them of doing something wrong?
Right. The question is, how do you talk to other parents about the dangers of pornography so that they're not offended, you're not accusing their kid of something, etc. And honestly, I find that I've never run into a parent who goes, oh yeah, I like my children watching porn. Now, they might think porn is okay for themselves, but often they're going to be they don't want their young child looking at pornography. It's a great means to start a conversation gently and provide and there's so many good resources here that you can really kind of get that going. But really helping them understand that when kids are viewing pornography, there's some serious dangers, not just in the future, right now. The United Kingdom has released statistics this year, or late last year, and they showed a 400%, a fourfold increase in children acting out on other children. The police, the counselors, the therapists are all pointing to pornography as what's been training them to act out on other children. This is real danger. So, broach the subject. You've been here. I bet you've learned quite a bit that where you can gently begin introducing that little by little by little. And I think you're going to find that often parents are going to be very open to discussing how do we protect our kids online. Yes, ma'am. What? Oh, that's a great question. Thank you. What if you freaked out? Oh my goodness, what are you looking at? Are you crazy? What if we've shamed? That's disgusting. I cannot believe you do anything like that in our home. Because the idea was, boy, if I make them feel guilty and bad enough, they'll never do it again, right? I heard a conversation out here in the lobby about a father who discovered their child was viewing pornography and pulled off his belt. And when that child grew up, he says, well, he's never looked, he just taught the child to hide, basically, is what happened. He said, my dad never caught me again. My dad never caught me again. He just learned to hide better. All right, so apologize. Maybe you apologize simply because you want to create an atmosphere of conversation for your child when they've viewed pornography at 10, 11, or 12. So whether it's, hey, this happened, or they've just been exposed, they're 12, 13, 14, whatever it is, and you say, son, or daughter, I just want to apologize to you. I should have known about this. I should have told you about this, and I'm sorry that you saw this. I didn't think it would happen, and I just want to say that I should have done more. And when you do that, suddenly, they're so much more open to now talking to you about all the other stuff. Yeah. I think we have time for one more question. Yes, sir, all the way in the back. How do you know when it's age appropriate? Okay. Well, certainly it's going to also depend on the maturity of your child. Where are they at? But we need to really begin having these conversations pretty preschool, where they know what about their body, what is private, what is intended. Educate, Empower Kids, great resources there to help guide you in that. Good Pictures, Bad Pictures again. I keep referring to the same resources, but these are great opportunities to have when your child is looking at porn. That's a great way to kind of arm yourself ahead of time. And that's a free ebook on covenanteyes.com. Thank you. You're a patient audience. Grateful you could be here. Go home and change the world.